Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started. I want to thank everyone for joining today's webinar, Exploring Wholeness and Joy Through Community Connectedness. Our special guest speaker is Dr. Rufus Spann. So I'll be doing a full introduction in just a moment. So before we get to that, I want to share with you a little bit about Henry Health and do a little bit of housekeeping. So this series is called the Coping with COVID webinar series. This is our last webinar in the series. If you're interested in the other webinars that were completed before this, they are available on our website. The purpose of today's webinar is to support you with finding social connections during the season of social distancing. And we know that social distancing is impacting our mental health and our sense of community. And many of us are feeling overwhelmed, uncertain, anxious, isolated, and depressed. So this session will uncover creative ways to stay connected to friends, family, and your communities during the current culture of social distancing. And a little bit about Henry Health. Henry Health is a disruptive platform created to arrest the toxic stress, depression, and anxiety killing too many Black men too soon. Our digital community provides self-mastery support and culturally sensitive teletherapy to Black men so they can show up whole, operate with joy, and live with power. So just a couple of housekeeping things. When we're on a webinar, we allow you, your mics are open, so we'll ask that you mute yourself if you're not speaking. That way there's an open line for the speaker. And the chat feature is going to be available, and we're going to utilize that throughout the webinar. So we really want to know what you think. We love engagement, hearing your feedback. You're our community, and so we want to hear from you. We want this to be a dialogue and a conversation. So we'll be directing you to use the chat feature throughout the webinar. So without further ado, let's get to learning about our speaker and starting our webinar. So Dr. Rufus Tony Spann is the Chief Clinical Officer for Henry Health. Dr. Spann is an assistant professor at the University of Southern California in the Masters of School Counseling program. And just a sidebar, he's also an amazing person to work with and just a brilliant mind. I really appreciate who he is and how he shows up for our community and our team within Henry Health. He's a nationally certified school psychologist, a master addiction counselor, and a nationally certified counselor associate psychologist. And a licensed clinical professional counselor in Maryland, Washington, D.C., and Virginia. So we're very, very lucky and thankful to have you here today, Dr. Spann. And I hand it over to you.
Thank you so much, Michelle, one, for saying that, because it just shows when we think about being a collective or being a team, I think that's what it's really about. As a community within Henry Health, and just as a global community, we have to give those times where we are sharing that energy, affirming those that we're with and supporting each other. And I think that's how we heal, and that's how we continue to move forward. And that will be a big part of what we're going to talk about today as we include electronics, as we talk about using maybe social media or other forms of connecting. We still want to remember that regardless of Michelle being in my presence or somebody else that's on this webinar or even listening to a recording, we are still a community, even if I am not in your presence, and we are connected, and we have to stay with that premise as we move forward. So at Henry Health, this is something that Michelle has brought in a lot of ways, and then also collaborated with me, having this 3-step framework where you think about defining, acknowledging, and adjusting. So define, acknowledge, and adjust. And this is something that we've continued through our webinars and in our framework of our work as mental health professionals at Henry Health. So I want to start off by saying that we are going to use the chat feature. So for those that are here, which includes Michelle, please use the chat feature in a way of reflecting and talking back to me as the presenter, because we all want to talk to each other. So it's time to reflect. So I started off by thinking, how do I bring in a lot of different principles that are just not Eurocentric or Westernized, but I bring in a lot of principles that come from the African diaspora, that come from the First Nation, the people of originally here in the United States. And so I wanted to bring a lot of culture to that context. So one, I start off with Kwanzaa principles. So thinking about Kwanzaa principles, Umoja, unity, maintaining unity as a family, community, and race of people. This was so important to me when I first started understanding Kwanzaa, and where Dr. Kergna wanted to bring African Americans together around 1966, post-Watts riots. He wanted to bring something into the community that brought in a connection. So my reflection question, if you're so willing to reflect or share, how have you maintained unity as a family, community, or race of people during this time? How have you maintained unity as a family, community, or race of people during this time? And again, we're going to use the chat feature. Now I'm going to even put something in there. All right. So Michelle, as I go to the next page, can you read out some of what's been put up there?
Sure. So we have reaching out to my elders, sharing resources with friends.
Mm-hmm.
Also, just a general comment about the principles of Kwanzaa, that being the optimal theory authored by Dr. Linda Myers. Yesterday, somebody was just exploring that, and Ma'at, and etc.
Nice.
Also, dialing into virtual tribes via Zoom.
Love that, love that. And I love even mentioning Ma and just the principles behind that. So social ecological model. So I'm bringing in this model just because I think it's going to bring some context, right? So at the base of the social ecological model, you have the individual. That's the knowledge, attitudes, and skills, right? That's the knowledge and attitudes that we bring into our community or our world. The second tier is that interpersonal. So that's the family, friends, and social network. So we're going to hover right around that when we think about connecting to each other and what it means to connect. But before we get there, you have to think about yourself in that. And we'll talk a little bit about more what that means. The third tier is organizational. So organizations and social institutions, as one of our members today just said, like he was going through some work and being connected to his tribes. Fourth tier is community, relationships between organizations. And fifth tier is public policy, state, local laws and regulations. And so we're going to get into what that means. But the reality is that we're all connected through family, through friends, through self, and so forth. So let's say that we started with the social ecological model, and we're still going to reflect one more time. So Kujichagulia, it's self-determination, defining, naming, and creating and speaking for ourselves. So the point of that is, how have you maintained determination, advocacy for yourself or others during these times? How have you maintained determination and or advocacy for yourself or others during this time? And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to speak mine out as maybe others will be putting their information in. I know for me, I wanted to use what I have in my knowledge and skills with mental health, with emotional health, by participating in webinars, by making sure that I'm supporting my community, by making sure that I take care of my well-being and being very determined to continue to help my community during times like this. I wanted to always be of service, and I knew my identity was a helper, and I'm being able to use that at this time. As I do see that, let me see, Michelle, do you have anything you may want to add to that?
Absolutely. I think that when we're in a position to feel like we're powerless or that things are out of control, I think self-determination is really important. So for me, it's been looking at where I do have the ability to make an impact. And that is, you know, taking care of people in my family, making sure people have groceries. I've noticed, and I imagine you as well, is that there's been these new networks that have been set up, like neighbors and communities and people, you know, systems are showing up for how, and I think that's always been a staple of the Black community is we'll figure it out. We're in it together, we'll figure it out. So yeah.
But I love that you said that, and just really getting back to the core principles and understanding like our protective factors and our supportive factors and relying on that. And that's particularly what general communities and people do, where these particular principles or understandings during times of oppression, during times of distress, even if that's ongoing or continuous stress and depression, we've relied on those particular supportive factors and protective factors, which have really helped us. And so thank you for sharing that. That is actually a core of my family community as well as your family community as we're connected. So going into the next step of this, I wanted to bring in some information from First Nations. And this is from the Blackfoot people and community. So Dr. Blackstock did some research and re-looked at the Maslow hierarchy of needs. And so if you're not familiar with the hierarchy of needs at the base talks about food, water, shelter, having this building up of then getting to a place of actualization. And so Dr. Blackstock talked about, well, in the Blackfoot Nation, where Maslow attended or went to their community back around 1938, saw their principles and took their principles, or the TP of the principles, and put it to a triangle, and then put what he thought from a westernized ideal were the way that people should function and how they got to actualization. However, Dr. Blackstock says self-actualization is at the base of the teepee. It's not a triangle, it's actually a teepee, not at the top, and is the foundation on which community actualization is built. The highest form that a Blackfoot can attain is called cultural perpetuity. And we'll get into what all those things mean, but the realizing of that is that we're able to look at one, ourselves. How am I then within my community? And then from there, how do I give longevity to my community, even when I'm not around? And so within most communities, such as if you had that village, one person would not be afraid to say, okay, here's my food, you have food. We're all protected because we protect the village. We protect the kids, so we teach all kids. So when we think about the needs of the community, all those needs were met, even if it's I give you a little bit of my food, so that the worry wasn't about food and shelter. If we all had food and shelter, it is more about how do I get to a point of understanding who I am within my community, and then cultural perpetuity, at least within First Nations. So let's talk a little bit more about what that meant. So self-actualization refers to the realization of a person's potential, self-fulfillment, seeking personal growth, and peak experiences, which really means that when I think about who I am within my community, I want to think about particularly how can I benefit my community? How do I benefit me? And so speaking from my frame of view, I knew that I was a helper. And it didn't take me long to realize that I was a helper because I was given the space, nourished, and given the opportunity to grow as a helper, which in the event I became a counselor, a psychologist, and I'm still helping. So that self-actualization for me within my community, within African-American community, and within a home that also has ties to like a Gullah culture, West Indian culture, and West African culture, it was definitely honed in on trying to understand who you are before somebody tells you who you are. So going into community actualization, that refers to the realization of a community's potential, community fulfillment, and seeking community growth and peak experiences. So what I want to do here is kind of switch it up a little bit and talk about it from an African-American perspective. This is from Dr. Barbara Sizemore, really heavy hitter in education and making educational change for Black kids and in urban cities. So Dr. Barbara Sizemore at one time said at a conference and was speaking about this, for the Black community to be generationally successful, it will need to heal mentally, emotionally, and physically from within. The importance of that is understanding that as a community, we have to heal from within. And so as we talk about like the actualization of the individual, each individual has to realize how they participate in the community, how they show up whole, operate with joy, and continue to be empowered in those ways. So cultural perpetuity, this was something that I had to learn and figure out. It is an understanding that you will be forgotten, which is totally fine. At some point, if I am not here, hopefully I am passing on something and contributing to what we live in this world. But you have a part in ensuring that your people's important teachings live on. So cultural continuity. So as we're seeing in the chat box, as we're talking about West African perspective, diaspora perspectives, as we talk about First Nation, as we talk about people, these are particular principles and ideas and identities that make our culture and who we are, and they have survived through the ages. The only way they're going to continue to survive, as Dr. Barbara Sizemore had just mentioned, as I speak her words out, is that we have to heal from within. We have to heal as a community, heal mentally, physically, and emotionally, because as we bear offspring, as we send our community forward into the generation, they have to be healthy too. The only way that they can be healthy is that we impart that healthy being into them. So what we want to do now is just do a quick breakout, maybe 6 to 10 minutes and maybe a little bit less, but we're going to do a stop for a second. We'll have a quick conversation, and then we'll come back and I'll reflect a little bit about what came up. So at this point, what we're going to do is we're going to stop the recording. Right, so we had a great breakout, and during the breakout, we all talked about each part of our communities and how important it is to, one, think about how our communities are part of our protective factors, as well as helping us to stay grounded and identify with what have been things that have been passed through generations and from a long way back up till now, and understanding of how there's many cultures sometimes within us and communities, but how we still bring those forth to connect in meaningful ways. So as we've already talked about the define, and the define was talking about the social ecological community, and then talking about the Blackfoot First Nation and how identifying with what is, and then acknowledging what it is to be self-actualization, acknowledging community actualization, and then talking about perpetuity, or that community continuity. It's all about saying, like, this community didn't just start with us. It's been something that's been passed along, but now we are a community of people that have been faced with social distancing. And rightly so, as we think about sequestering and making sure that we're staying safe, but making sure that others around us are safe so that we're protecting each other from the pandemic. However, we still have to remember that there's the individual, the interpersonal, all these other communities that we're connected to. And so at Henry Health, we wanted to talk about, hey, if you haven't thought about it like this, here's some things that you can do to help with these different parts of you and your community. So starting off with the individual. So if we think about how to continue that self-actualization or continuing our work in our own community or person within the community, one, I wanted to say, think about personal reflection, growth, journal, self-help, wellness, mental, physical, emotional support, fun activities, learning, exercise, healthy eating, meditation. All these things could help with the individual while being maybe sequestered in your condo, in your apartment, in your home, maybe with other people that are in the home, and maybe it's a little chaotic. Maybe you still want to have that personal time. So if we're thinking about how you may be able to connect through social media, and then maybe connecting to other people, one, I always start with each one of these: no electronics, take breaks. Try to step away from electronics and take many breaks from electronics, because although we're now connected to them in a way of socializing, you still can disconnect from them and socialize. There's many other ways of doing that and debugging from that. So, but ways of doing that through social media, maybe through self, is maybe blogging. Maybe you want to talk about your personal experience. Maybe a video journal that helps with the individual, writing a personal narrative. Expressive dance, as we've heard, two expressive art therapists are a part of this webinar today. Drawing, teletherapy, audiobooks, learning opportunities that may be opportunities to learn about yourself or learn something new. WhatsApp helps to talk to maybe people that are international. Maybe you want to continue to talk to your community. As I have a friend that's down in Mexico City, I continue to talk to her through WhatsApp. Text, make sure that you're still connecting to other people. Telephone, telemedicine. So I put telemedicine just in case, if you, just a reminder, if you are sick, you still can reach out to a doctor. You don't have to say, I'm just going to bear through this burden, because we want you to be at your optimal health. So thinking about the individual and your personal health. Maybe some gaming for those that are gamers. I don't want to forget about that community either. Searching, sharing, and healthy eating and cooking. So if you think about eating healthy, look for new eating habits, or how to connect to a community that's talking about growing a garden inside. There's plenty of communities out that are out now that could help you and work with you on continuing to think about the individual. All right. So interpersonal. This is where we think about interpersonal as like engagement with family, friends, all these people that are in our lives. And so if we think about the larger part of the community, we've gone from the individual now to connecting to other people. So there's ways of doing this: activities amongst friends, family time, learning online for K through 12 students. So we don't want to forget about our students are now not in the school buildings. They're at home. However, there's still ways for them to connect with other students. So I know as adults, we talk a lot about, oh, Zoom happy hour, but think about these kiddos. They still need to have time to socialize with other kids as well. So be mindful of that. Couples separated by distance. There's some couples that, you know, they were meeting each other. Maybe they lived in other areas of the world or maybe other areas of the state, and now they're separated by distance. We need to think about how to keep them connected as well. Family, friends in different states or countries. We've seen that, we've talked about that. We all are from, in some ways, different areas. And then online social communities or social networks. So ways of doing that, search online games to play remotely. There are plenty of games that you can do to connect with friends, like Words with Friends or Ruzzle. I love these games because I can get right onto an app, connect, and Ruzzle I love because it helps me create new words that I never thought about. Same thing with Words with Friends. Maybe think about a movie night through Zoom. I know a lot of my friends are doing that. I haven't tried it, but it's a way of connecting and having a movie night together. A dance party. That's that great movement and flow and exercise. Story time, maybe reading your niece and nephew a book and doing a story time with them. Virtual play dates. I know families that are doing this now where it's allowing for the kids maybe to play in their monitor, but it allows for them to have that parallel play. Google Classroom or learning activities for our students. Zoom happy hour for those that like to still have a little sip every now and then. Online comedy show. I actually just saw that it was a recent online comedy show if I wanted to attend that. Creating your own games or challenges. So that could be very cool. Instead of looking for games or on apps, maybe create your own. Pray together. Maybe you want to pray and have a prayer circle amongst friends and family. You can do that on the telephone, or maybe do that in workshops. And last but not least, distant cooking. I've seen where some people, they'll cook in their kitchen with somebody else and just have a great conversation that comes along with that distant cooking. So time to reflect. Ujima. Collective work and responsibility, building and maintaining our community, solving problems together. So reflect or share, how can we collectively work together during this time to problem solve and help each other? So I know for me, collective work is kind of like what I'm doing now with Michelle, or working with a lot of other stakeholders that have been coming my way, because we find that there's a connectivity. Recently, I worked with an owner from Yumlish, and she's working with diabetes, and she wanted to collaborate on working with pre-existing issues and mental health with people of color. And so that was a great way of working collectively together. Michelle, is there anything that you may want to say or something that's coming up in the chat box?
Sure. This is a comment in the chat box from a little bit earlier, but it was about, taking responsibility in the community by taking time to dive deeper into sharing with my sphere of influence, African-centered psychology, theoretically and practically, has been empowering for that person.
Very nice.
Absolutely. And then what you were just sharing about, I think what I've noticed is how hard everything was when you're trying to do it at the individual level, like one person running to the store and trying to, maybe make other errands or take care of things, versus creating a network, right? Where maybe neighbors are calling and saying, hey, I'm running to Costco, do you need anything? And I'm saying, oh, you have a delivery coming, I can get that for you. Or, we have extra water, do you need some? So I've just noticed this open sense that's happening, that, people are figuring it out now, so that not everybody's burning out, but they're doing things in networks and in support systems.
Very nice. Great example, like that support network system. And how do you use either the technology to leverage that? How do you just reach out and call somebody to leverage that? How do you make sure that you're thinking about, there's another network that is not a network that's plugged into electronics. It's your own network that you have of people and human beings, and supporting each other and leveraging the energy that comes along with that community. So I really appreciate you saying that. So as we continue on and thinking about organizational and institutional, these are really these places where we're thinking about marriage, As I do a lot of counseling with newlyweds, and as they're experiencing their first time of being home with their other partner for this amount of time in their life, thinking about other couples that are maybe married to newlyweds, religious affiliations, colleges, universities, as we just heard somebody talking earlier about working through dissertation, college/work, family connections, social structures, and friends. And so if we think about this, there's ways of continuing to have these organizational institutional networks, participate in alumni webinars. There may be great things that are coming along from your institution, fraternity or sorority webinars. I know Alpha Phi Alpha is sending out a lot of great webinars and trying to connect as an organization. Follow civic organizations on Facebook, LinkedIn, or Twitter. You know, become a part of their network and make sure that you're getting connected to them and follow them. World Health Organization did a live broadcast. We're bringing us all together globally. And I tuned into that and saw that there was this level of connection. Go to organizational website, become a part of their listserv. So be a part of their mailing if you're looking for more connection in that realm. Volunteer to be a part of committees. There's plenty of committees that still are happening virtually. Maybe you can be a part of those organizations or institutions. Be a part of a virtual meeting. There's a lot of virtual meetings that are happening on right now that don't have to be a part of work. It could be a part of something where maybe it's the usher board, or maybe it's something else that's going on in your life that related to your work organization or other organizations. Conference calls, online family reunions. William, one of our participants, always says that online family reunions, birthday parties. I know people are having lots of birthday parties online, so it doesn't stop that connection. And then last but not least, couples, date night, and movie night. So I know one of our members of Henry Health talked about how they were having couples or date night where they would be on Zoom, they would prepare dinner in their house and eat dinner with another couple, and it helped to bring a level of connectedness within the marriage unity. All right, so as we continue on, if we think about community, so as Michelle was saying and kind of bringing this in, we're thinking about connecting with narrative of others, participating in action, advocating, caring for others through action, financial giving, acknowledging others, create masks for others, where I know a lot of people right now are creating masks and sewing masks together, which I think is beautiful. Buy local. You still have the ability to buy local, even online. Think about acts of kindness, where Michelle was mentioning maybe buying somebody's groceries if they need help, or maybe helping somebody that's lost their job and supporting them through financial means or giving to them. Create communities online to connect. You don't have to wait for one. There may not be a community that you're looking for. As I said, maybe it's indoor gardening, and get 4 or 5 of your friends that are wanting to do indoor gardening, and you guys are talking about that and creating something new. Find like-minded individuals. You may find people through social media and through other spaces that you now created new spaces of friends where you can connect. Neighborhood, block, or community, that's the community that you may live in. Like my community, it's a community that is connected through an app, and I'll talk about that. And last but not least, the global community. So social media, connecting through that, there are tons of social media groups, blogging, creating a consortium of different people that are in like-minded, maybe creating your own Black Renaissance through something like that. Create a conference where, you know, a lot of universities and people are creating mental health conference from Monday through Friday, where it allows individuals to attend a great conference where you're bringing all Zoom meetings together. Buy from small business, local communities you're a part of. What I mean by that is, I know like right now, I saw a young lady and one of my friends put me onto it. She makes natural organic soap. She's African-American. She does face masks. She has all these other organic opportunities for health and well-being. And that's thinking about buying from a part of a community that I'm with, or even buying local and thinking about that. So spiritual or faith virtual worships, there's lots of that still happening. So be mindful, if you're still wanting to worship, you can do so. Help those in need online by giving. There's plenty of places that are reputable sites that you can give. Or maybe if you just realize that one of your friends lost their job or may need support, or maybe somebody you know, maybe there's a way to support them online. And last but not least, neighborhood chat app. So in my community, we have something called Square. And so Town Square allows for me to talk to other community members where I don't leave my house, but maybe they're saying, you know what, I saw somebody strange in the neighborhood walking around, be careful. Or I saw a fox running out the woods, so keep your dogs locked up. There's still ways of connecting in your own personal community through maybe an app like that. So this will be our last time to reflect. It's Ujama, and that's Cooperative Economics, building and maintaining retail stores and other business and to profit from these ventures. So I think it's something really important to talk about this and reframe it or frame it in a way that's helpful for us. So reflect or share, how can we support small business, help those who lost a job, and maintain economic structure in our communities during this time? How can we support small business, help those who lost a job, and maintain economic structures in our communities during this time? Now, you don't have to answer all of that. You can pick something that you feel like works best for you, but something to think about. And so I'll kind of talk about this from a standpoint. I know that there's been recent stimulus packages and supporting, some of our larger businesses like United Airlines and just some other people have received, but still think about maybe some of the smaller businesses that may not have received that. That could be somebody that's been surviving off of their business, that maybe it's not virtual and they may still need some support, and maybe they're still selling their items now online. But is there anything maybe, Michelle, that you may want to add, or somebody else?
So I did want to share, I know we've been seeing in the media, let me address, first of all, in the chat, one of our members says that he spends time working with colleagues to write articles centered on Black and Brown people in terms of COVID-19 and health disparities. So I think that is a huge contribution, is just bringing education and information to our communities about what's going on. In regards to helping economically, I think that is also the solution, is a lot of education. So while we're hearing about stimulus packages, I got people sending me emails or text messages about other programs, people who are just contributing to different areas and communities. And if you live in a certain area, there have been people who've been waiving rent or covering costs or helping. So I just think it's been really being tapped into communities, and I think it's a lot of word of mouth. And for the businesses that are the staples of our community, like our family-owned restaurants and our family-owned businesses, like you mentioned, I just make it a point, if I'm going to be spending my dollars, that they go to where it matters most, especially right now. It's like you said, the soaps, or I think it's just really taking that extra energy to purchase and have your money really support. And I think you vote with your dollars. So I mean, we say what we want to see more of when every time we spend a dollar.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And thank you for even sharing one from the chat and even speaking from your personal experiences and just what that means for you, and then what it means for all of us. So as we were thinking and reflecting on this, I asked that we just remain conscious during this time and do what we can to connect to community, to support community, to help the individual, to help us maintain during this pandemic, and also the economic concerns and crisis that we'll be experiencing. So last but not least is just public policy as we think about the ecological model and of social ecological model. And so this is the higher point of where we've already had talking about how he has been a part of this process and being a part of politics. And so this is where we're looking for sustainable change. We're looking to do global change. We're trying to enact policy, thinking about commerce, structure, globalization, and equity. And so this is on the larger level, but this has an impact on the community, the global community, has impact on the individual, the interpersonal communities. It impacts on how we're experiencing this pandemic right now. It has predated the pandemic, and it will probably be post this. But how do we impact that? How do we continue change in using social media connections? One, think about setting a day aside for remembrance, hashtags or campaigns, talking about those that are being lost, the fight for, thinking about people of color, particularly those pre-existing issues, those with disparities, thinking about the issues with insurance, thinking about the issues with healthcare, creating or setting a day aside for remembrance for the brothers and sisters that have been lost due to this, creating hashtags and campaigns, putting the word out and pushing that into social media. Think about using Twitter to create a virtual town hall, to think about creating levels of equity, thinking about talking about healing our earth, thinking about commerce, structure, and globalization. Also blogging or videoing and talking about how this has been an experience for you, or maybe even a podcast where you're connecting with other people of like mind, people of your community, and you're getting the word out and you're pushing it into social media. You're pushing it out there now so people can hear your voice and do something with what we have right now. And then post this. Don't stop. Continue that energy. So connecting with organizations that represent you on a local, state, or federal level. Continue to push out and make sure that the word is heard. And last but not least, connecting with influencers or those with social capital. Continue to push, push, push as much as you can. And so with that, using social media from all levels will make sure that we get there together.
Okay,
So,
Dr. Span, I just want to share one thing from the chat. We have hashtag support Black businesses. And people saying, yes, supporting our businesses is essential, especially now.
yes.
Also, galvanize communities to call, email elected officials, Zoom into town halls, learn how to engage in impactful numbers in suitable ways. Oh, sustainable ways. Yeah, absolutely.
I love that. I love that. And thank you for adding that to this conversation. As the member added that to the conversation. And thank you for thinking enough about your voice being shared so that others can hear this too. So community action on a larger level, that policy change, that sustainable change, if we think about that continuity, if we think about cultural continuity, perpetuity, and pushing ourselves forward, we have to get these things to be actionable change within the society that we live in, where we're looking at policy, fighting for that, talking about it, marching for it, putting it into action, put it into commerce, put it into the dollar. And so these are how we will all connect as a community. So I just want to say thank you for being a part of this webinar. I don't know if there are any questions. So as I'm reading out additional resources, if there are any questions, we'll take them. But please take a minute to write a question if need. If not, if we don't answer it right now, you can always email us and we'll get back to you. So for additional resources, you can go to henry-health.com/coping with COVID-19. As we think about hashtag campaigns, here's one, hashtag coping with COVID-19. Some other things that we still have going on are wellness calls. So you can sign up for a free wellness call using our schedule form. That's at our website. We are having teletherapy right now, so please think about scheduling your first session. And also we have an infographic created by our Michelle. And she's done a wonderful job on that and collaborating with other team members. But please think about sharing our infographic in social media. It could really help somebody to think about being healthy and saving their life possibly. And again, hashtag coping with COVID-19. And last but not least, additional webinars. We will have additional webinars post this webinar, but when we think about the series, this was our last webinar series, but we will continue to make sure that we're bringing helpful resources and information to webinars. But we do appreciate everybody that's been attending our webinar so far. It's been a great time. Is there anything that may have come up, Michelle? Any questions?
No, I just, on behalf of the attendees and those people that will be viewing this, I want to thank you for your contribution. I feel like it was such a unique and much needed perspective on community and bringing in the principles of Kwanzaa. And I'm just excited for how many people will get an opportunity to take these in and incorporate them into their lives, especially now. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you for that, Michelle. And so on that note, please continue to think about your wellness, stay safe during these times, and we will just see you at the next webinar, next event that will be put on by Henry Health.